Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's Quinton here and this is tutorial number 47. And in this tutorial I'm gonna talk to you guys about checkboxes and radio buttons. Now most of you guys probably already know what a checkbox is. It's just one of those boxes that you click on it and it's checked, and if you click on it again it's unchecked. Okay? So quite simple, and a radio button pretty much works the exact same way, except that a radio button can only have one of the options selected, whereas a checkbox could have many options selected. And we'll get into that later on in the tutorial, but for now let's actually put some checkboxes on our page. So we're gonna have to ask the user a question, and it could be a question that requires multiple answers or multiple choices. So let's say I ask the user, what are you most likely to do in your spare time? So what do you do in your spare time? Okay, and we could give them a couple options here. So I'm actually gonna put a break tag there just for display purposes, but we can give them a few different options. So we can say play sport, okay, and that can be a checkbox. So to add a checkbox onto our page, we're going to add an input with a type equal to checkbox, and this will make sure that our input element is actually rendered as a checkbox. Then as usual we have to give our checkbox a name. So I'm going to give this a name of I don't know, spare time. So we'll go spare underscore time. And the reason why we give every checkbox a name is because whenever we're sending these values back to our server, then we want to send through a name to identify the value that was checked. And in the case of a checkbox, we might often send through more than one. So you might very often, especially in the case with PHP, see people give their checkboxes a name that actually has little square brackets here on the end, and that's got to do with programming. So I'm not really going to cover that here, but you might actually see that happen sometimes. So just, you know, take note of that. So we'll send through a value of, or we'll send through a name of spare time, but what do we want to send through as a value? Well, of course, the value we're going to put in as an attribute, and the value is basically what we're going to send as programmers or as designers back to the server, because the user gets to see this part. They get to see that they're ticking the option for playing sport, but we get to decide on our end actually what value we want to send back. So this is a little bit different to a text box, whereas you guys can remember a value for a text box actually determined what was going to be displayed inside of that text box. So this is a little bit different to that, and we'll just give this a value of sport. Okay, and we could probably end this off right there. So that is one option. Let's go ahead and make a few more. So we can say play sport, we can also say play computer games or something, and the last option, just something kind of girly, we'll say shopping. Okay, and then we'll send this as games and this as shopping. So we're just changing these values. Now if we were going to send all of these back to the server like this, we might want to give each one a different name. Otherwise we'd be doing something like this. We'd use the same name, but we would put in those square parentheses, and this basically all is determined by whatever server-side scripting language you're using, whether it be PHP or Python or something like that. So it also depends on what the programmer would like these names to be. So you might want to just find out from him whenever you're actually naming your elements. Yeah, kind of hit a blank there. I didn't know what I was saying. But anyways, let's go ahead now and save this and actually take a look at what this looks like in the browser. So we got to go over there and just run this in Firefox. And as you can see, we now have a question for the user. So what do you do in your spare time? And they can tick play sport, play computer games, or shopping. And as you can see, we're able to select multiple checkboxes. We could just send through 2 or 1, or we could send through all 3, and that would be fine. Okay. And the user could actually choose to send through no values at all. But we might decide that we want something to be checked by default. So whenever you want an option to be checked by default, you can add in this attribute, which is checked, and you can just set that equal to checked. And this will basically tell HTML or tell the browser, okay, this option needs to be checked by default. So it won't actually work if I just refresh this. I'm going to have to run it in Firefox anew. And as you can see, whenever the user actually first loads this page, they're going to have play sport ticked by default. Okay, so now that we've talked about checkboxes for so long, it's time to actually move on to radio buttons. And I don't think I'm going to delete all of this code. We'll leave that there as it is, but we'll add in, I think, 2 break tags over here. So maybe just highlight this and hit Control D, and that's going to duplicate it once. And that means we should at least have a little bit of space between our checkboxes and our radio buttons. Now, radio buttons can only have one option ticked at a time, or checked at a time. So whenever we group radio buttons together, we have to give them the same name, because that's how the browser knows that they're all part of one group. And it also, that's how the browser knows that only one of those items is supposed to be checked. Okay, so let's give our radio, or let's put some radio buttons on the page, and in order to do that, let's just ask a yes/no question. So, do you play League of Legends? And that's pretty much my go-to question whenever I talk about radio buttons. It's kind of funny. In my PHP tutorial, I did that as well. So, yeah. Okay, and we're going to give the user the option to say they do play League of Legends, so yes. And just for display purposes, we need to add a break tag there. And I'm going to give I'm going to put in an input element over here of type equal to radio, and that is going to make this actual input element a radio button. And then we're going to give that a name, and we're going to set that equal to plays lol, just because that's the first thing that came to mind, I guess. And then I'm going to give this a value of yes. So keep in mind that this works exactly the same as a checkbox, that we decide what value we want to send through to the server. So whenever the user ticks this option, then we know that we're going to send through the value yes, because the user can see this word over here, yes. Okay, so they do indeed trust that they're sending through the value yes, and it's going to send through with a name of plays lol. Now we obviously also want to give them an option to say no, and we're going to change the value to no. But make sure that the name is the same, because if you guys give each one of these radio buttons a different name, then it's not going to group them in the form, and you might be able to select more than one at a time. And radio buttons are meant to only have one ticked. So let's go back here and click refresh. And as you can see, we've got our second question over here, do you play League of Legends? And the user can either tick yes, or they can tick no. But as soon as we tick no, then yes is not checked, and as soon as we tick yes, then no is not checked. So we can only have one of these selected at a time. And again, if you want one of those selected by default whenever the user browses your website or whenever they first visit your website, then you can just add in this attribute here, which is checked is equal to checked, and that will just make sure that by default whenever the user first loads this page in their browser, that yes is actually checked. And if I want to be 100% accurate, I should actually run that in Firefox again. So there we go. And that's all I have for you guys in this tutorial. So as always, don't forget to subscribe. Please feel free to leave a comment, like, or share this video. It's really going to help my channel grow, and I will see you guys in the next one.